is 8 o'clock, so I want to take the opportunity to welcome everyone to this presentation here tonight of the 10 Axioms of Combat Commander. This is meant to be tactical advice for new players, although we're hoping you have at least some basic experience with Combat Commander. And of course, our salty veterans out there, everyone has their way of playing Combat Commander, but this is something we hope will be of benefit to everybody. My name is Patrick Pence. For those of you who do know that I've got a channel out there, Patrick's Tactics and Tutorials. I was volunteered once again by Harold for the SDHistcon. In the past, I've just done a couple of introductory presentations on the various game systems, one of them being Combat Commander, the others being the Great Campaigns of the American Civil War, which is the second leg of the channel's pillars. The third one is Commands and Colors, so I take the opportunity to teach these to new players as much as I can. They're my three favorites. So I've pretty much built the entirety of my channel around that. So I've got lots and lots of videos out there, and I will have links to this video afterwards that I'll put into the text. I am recording it, of course. Harold reached out and said, "Hey, would you like to do a presentation?" And I said, "Great. What would you like to do?" He said, "Well, you just did gangbusters with Combat Commander, and clearly there's an audience for that. So why don't you do that?" And I said, "Well, do I really want to do the exact same thing?" And he said, "Why don't you reach out to Kai and the two of you do something together?" And I said, "Why don't I reach out to Kai? That's a brilliant idea." So my co-host extraordinaire tonight is Kai Jensen, and I will let her introduce herself to you all.
Well, thank you. Like you said, I am Kai Jensen. I was the developer for Combat Commander, actually originally Company Commander, before we got picked up by GMT. And we thought it'd be fun just to walk you guys through sort of a Combat Commander 201. Since the 101 gets covered over and over for new players. This is just a little more of the do's and don'ts. Once you get the grounding in what's going on with the game. And I think, Patrick, you were going to start with a quick overview of your ladder information.
Yeah, so basically everything we've done tonight that we've put together, Kai and I have some notes on the individual slides that we will certainly go through together. But the source of all of this is our Combat Commander ladder. For those of you who are not familiar with it, I take the opportunity to hawk this thing all the time, but we do have a core of players for an ongoing ladder tournament style, where you just join the ladder and you are paired up with an opponent and you play one game a month. That's all you have to do. We vary the scenarios. We go through, the way it works out is we have from the base game, which starts here in June, all the way wrapping around till the end of the year. We have each one of the battle packs. We just take a random scenario out of there. I pair up everyone. You move up and down the ladder based on your wins and losses, and we're also keeping track of your ratings, which I'll talk a little about later when we look at some of the data for the ladder. And a couple of years ago, I set up a Discord server, which was just perfect. So in the middle of COVID, we had the opportunity to really build a community. And once we were able to assemble everyone into this togetherness space of Combat Commander, we could have all sorts of discussions going on. And one of the channels that came up was, of course, strategy and tips. And it was a good opportunity for the new players that were coming onto the ladder to learn just from those veterans out there that have played this since 2006. So it just became this wonderful stream of consciousness discussion. And just as a gag, I started taking sort of a quasi-religiosity approach to it, and we started writing these axioms, and I could put them into a central document, pin it to the top. We've come up with 10, and we are going to go through each of those 10 tonight and discuss them in detail. We just want to highlight the ladder here because of that wonderful community that we've built and this artifact that has come out of it. So here we are starting our 8th year, and we have 100 active players going on all the time. So before we get started, I am going to throw it back over to Kai and let her talk about the developmental history of Company Commander.
So this game came from another game that Chad and I were working on for 2.5 years. Started back in 2002, I think, called Fire for Effect, where because we were playing so much Legend of the Five Rings, big L5R fans, and we wanted to do something World War II related, but that had that same concept of using the cards for everything. So you built the terrain, you built the units, the effects, everything came off of cards. And so we actually had a game that was up and running, but just didn't quite have that right feel for what we were trying to accomplish. And you can see here, we've got, I think, 7 different nationalities. It was all of World War II. It's got all the terrain you could think of. I've got a full rule book for it and everything. It's probably within 3 months of being publishable, if anybody ever pulled it back out and really worked on it. But having been so grounded for 2 years in all this information, but missing that field that we were after, one day right after Christmas, it just hit Chad. He knew exactly what he wanted. And the one big change that he needed to make was to take all the effects that we had and put them on an actual map. So we had started out with, we wanted to go mapless and everything was on the cards and that was going to build it for you every time and it was going to be amorphous. But the feel wasn't there. And as soon as he put all this information onto a map, it made all the difference in the world. And all of a sudden we switched over to counters and everything, but the card presence remained in that everything else that you know of the game now slotted onto the cards. So the dice, the orders, the actions, all that stuff remained on that deck of cards, which looks a little different. Really interesting, though, to me, going back and looking through this material at these old cards of how much they look now, to my mind, like fighting formations. Because we had the white and black, the soft firepower, hard firepower, and all of the things that eventually went into fighting formations. I am recognizing on these cards now that I've looked back at them. But Company Commander came into being in about 4 weeks. So like I said, he had the idea right after Christmas. January, he sat down and every evening he was working on this. And at the end of the month, I came home from work and there was a set of the game on the table. Counters, cards, a whole 9 yards. And he's like, okay, I'm ready to teach you. Here's what we've got. And so from this one game and our frustration with it came something completely different, but still for us retained the cards did everything kind of a feel, which is where this Fire for Effect had started.
You said that you were playing a lot of Legend of the Five Rings. Was his intent when he developed this, was this going to be a collectible card game, a living card game, or more of just static, you get what's in the box and then it has that feel, but it's not dynamic?
It's meant to be static. Yeah, we weren't trying to do any sort of a living card game or continue adding to it because his general MO, even at that point, was to design a game and then move on to something completely different. Because every time he started a new design, he set himself a challenge for something that he didn't know how to do yet. And so he didn't want to keep working. That's why Combat Commander only has the 3, well, if you count Resistance, 4 box sets. He didn't want to continue doing the same thing over and over. And that's why we involved other people doing the battle packs, because he had done with that challenge and moved on. And so we didn't want to have a product that we were going to have to continually support in that way, continually designing new material. So this was just a one and done, all 7 factions in one shot. We had no idea like how big that was or if anybody would even produce it, but that's how he designed it.
And who ultimately made the change of Company Commander to Combat Commander?
That was GMT's recommendation because there were several products already on the market, use it like video games and other things that were utilizing the name Company Commander. So they wanted something that kind of set this apart. And so they tossed around a couple of ideas. Combat Commander was the closest sounding to what we had started with. So we just latched onto that. But it was just to differentiate us from what was already out there. Funny thing was, though, as soon as we chose that and kind of like leaned into it and started branding everything on it, we started doing a little bit of research. There's also about the same number of Combat Commander products out there as there were Company Commander products. So in the long run, it was kind of a crapshoot that it went that way.
When you first told me that, I was like, oh, I really like Company Commander. But, here we are almost 20 years later, and they're both great because we know at its heart it's more than just what's in a name. So thank you for that background information.
Yeah.
Well, so here's where we're going to go with this. I wrote them in a fun sort of religious script, so I will deliver them as such. and we will discuss them in detail. Many of them are straightforward, but as we go through these, if you have any additional thoughts on these, feel free to chime in. We will certainly have more discussion at the end if you can think of additional ones. So if you've got something in your brain, scribble it down and we will talk about it at the end, because this is not comprehensive by any stretch of the imagination. This is a good starting point. We got to 10 and we're like, well, 10, hey, that's got some religious overtones, so let's just go with that. But I'm sure there are more that we can articulate. But here we go. Axiom number 1. Thou shalt not use a move order without a subsequent recover or revive card in thy fist. And as you can see here, I've got an example. I personally, and a lot of my opinions on this, and Kai even mentioned it before we started, that let me just say right from the get-go, I am a middling Combat Commander player. We're going to talk about ratings and strength of opponents later. I'm about a 500 player. So take all of this advice as you will, but I think when we look at all of these concepts that were shared with us, most of them are pretty straightforward, but these are not absolute. Neither. So in this case, if you are moving your units around on the map, and you're not doing the sly, hey, I've got 2 move orders and I'm going to feint to the left and then go to the right, you're always going to be the subject of opportunity fire. So in order to manage some of the risk, I personally think this is just a very fine way of doing some risk management. Just have that there, because you never know. He could throw mines out. He could do opportunity fire. It could be an event that breaks somebody. So just have something as a backup plan, because you don't want a squad or a team or even a leader out in an area where their movement points are exhausted and now they are a sitting duck. If you've got 2 orders, first order, do a move, great. And if you have, you should have a recover in your hand for any and all possibilities. Axiom 2. Playeth the hand you have to the best of thine own ability. Discardeth only if thy last resort.
For this one, my big thing is to check for actions that enhance your orders. Because even if your orders are garbage, you've got stuff that you can't do anything with. If you can pull off one good order and still dump 2 or 3 actions to enhance it, that's emptying your hand to get it refilled with fresh cards just as well as being able to play a series of orders. So always be checking your actions, especially if you're in the middle of firing. Look for those things you can add to what you got going on. If you don't hold the cards for the orders you want to play, look again at what you do have and see if there's a way to make best use of it. Get creative. Don't get so focused on one set of units and forget that other units that are on the map can be useful to help cycle some of those cards out of your hand. All that said, though, watch for the time when your opponent gives up and they decide that they have to discard, because if you do the same thing on your following turn, if you're still holding that hand, oh crap, that's the best time for you to take advantage of that, because it's going to prevent a loss of tempo for you. It's 2 seconds of game time for each of you, but nothing happened while you were not doing anything.
And I picked this little screenshot here because too many times, and I know there are some people out there right now that have seen this exact hand. I've got nothing but routes, recovers, and even worse, command confusions. But even in this situation here, if there's at least one broken unit somewhere on the map, that does give you the opportunity perhaps to get at least a route or a recover out of your hand. And short of, because some scenarios may, and certain battle packs may require that you discard your entire hand. And so if there's stuff that you want to preserve, just trying to do something with nothing, as Cool Hand Luke says, sometimes nothing is a pretty cool hand. Well, for the people that dislike Combat Commander, they say, I just have a handful of Drek here. I can't do anything with it. And I think we're going to show that good play means that you can try to find some opportunity to play a card for something, whether it's for an action or for an order that even doesn't have any consequence, but it gets it out of your hand and makes room for something better. On to Axiom 3 now. Forget ye not the objectives of thy scenario. Too often in this one, we see new players just get a squad in there and they have a handful of fire cards, and what do? They just start firing. That's what they want to do. Fire, fire, fire. They think this is World War II combat, so I must do nothing but smite my enemy. And that's not always the case. I mean, we've got the wonderful scene from the Dirty Dozen here, where Lee Marvin is just walking them through all the objectives of how to take out the chateau, and he makes this wonderful mnemonic device for all of them to go through the steps. That's exactly what you should be doing. You look at the scenario card. It's going to give you the prescribed scenario from the setup, but there are 5 objectives on every map. And you need to take opportunities to capture those other objectives. So you need to assess right out of the gate whether the goal of this particular scenario card is, do I attack the enemy in order to force them to surrender? Do I try to get victory points for a key objective location? Or can I get the best collection of victory points from simply exiting the map? And we will certainly come back to that. And also remember that even if a map objective is worthless at the start, and oftentimes there's only one on the map that's, as you can see here in this open objective, this one specifically says that every one of the 5 objectives is worth 2 victory points. Well, there's hidden information on both sides, as we may have drawn from the beginning, that a certain one may be worth something that is unknown to you. So go ahead and try to grab that objective and just sit on it and hold it, because you may draw an event later on that will make that super valuable. I will move on to Axiom 4 now. Exiting the map is a pathway to glory, lest ye cower in thy foxholes. And again, too often we see people are focused on this sitzkrieg, as I've heard it called, or they're just sitting there constantly doing firefights back and forth and not moving. And they're throwing away move cards, or they're just not taking the opportunity to perhaps flank around an enemy and say, okay, well, if I can't move him off of that objective, I can exit the map if he's not going to chase me, and I can get a boatload of points, especially if that is a double victory objective. Don't sit there and focus only on fire attacks hoping to eliminate, when you can get just as many points typically for exiting the map. And that is the one that even I struggle with, because you just get, as Kai mentioned, a tempo. And if you get into this tempo of just constantly, well, he shot at me, I'm going to shoot back at him. If there are points to be had and there are units that are in a safe position to exit the map, get off that map, because, and Kai, you noted this one here specifically, that they are a resource, they are a reinforcement that you get to put at some point in the future. You can put them on the next time advance, you could put them 3 or 4 away, or some of the keen players can try to get units completely off the map and end the game prematurely by having no units on the map. So don't forget that you are a mobile infantry here. You're trying to get somewhere, whether it's taking objectives or getting off of the map.
If things have changed and the flow of, where people are located on the map, the enemy's gotten kind of behind you, is that instead of having to backtrack all the way back across the map, if you run off the edge on the right, you're going to come back in on the left, and that way you're right in their face again. And so it may actually be the shorter path to get back into position. In some cases, I've seen that happen.
Our scenario this past month, where the Americans are trying to get around the Germans, and if the Germans are set up far enough in advance, I had a move order. I could, exactly as you said, I could move right off the map, and suddenly that German squad with a heavy machine gun and a leader is now at the edge of the map waiting for the Americans on the other side.
Very, very effective.
All right, Axiom 5 now. Being blessed in virtue, the defender shall burneth the decks with lowly attacks, so as to bring forth the end times.
I love this one. This is just, take all those shots, fire at everything, use up everybody individually. If you're not in a position with the Death Star stack to make the be-all, end-all, you're going to kill everything in one shot, bust it up into the smallest little bits you've got, knowing that it's not going to have an effect on being able to break somebody unless you get super lucky. You're going to burn so many cards just making each one of those piddly little attacks. And as the defender, think of all the opportunities for more triggers to happen, more events to come up, more chaos to keep those decks churning. It's an absolutely fabulous way to burn through that deck if you're holding the advantage as the defender. Not to say that if you have a powerful fire group and you can do some significant damage, do the damage. Absolutely. You can also choose your target hex where your opponent has stacked up a large majority of his forces to make them flip cards on defense rolls to burn out their deck as well. So that also is a great way to advance time. Put the pressure on them. If you're the attacker, if it's late enough in the game where you're holding the VP advantage, so it becomes a good way for you to speed up the end game, just to secure that win and make sure nothing squirrely happens at the last minute to strip you of your victory. Deck tempo is an excellent way to hold on to a victory if you've got it.
And I'm very glad that you had put that note in there for us, specifically about that postural change, of the tempo is, hey, I'm the attacker now. I use specifically the defender in this axiom, but it's really whoever is in the lead is going to utilize this methodology. Card churning is absolutely a card management game. So if you can, and in this case here where we've got Tom Hanks as captain, he is pulling out his 45, and your leader usually has a range of 1, maybe 2, and if he's adjacent, he should be firing individually as well. So use that leader, because you draw a card, you may get an event, that's a second, possibility of a card, and may cause him to do at least 2 or 3 additional draws for random hexes and anything like that. So you just never know how many cards you can churn up just by making an individual attack.
And so if you're sitting on the VPs and you're looking for that time trigger, that's where they're going to come from. So turn away.
Axiom 6 now. Mind thy initial setup. Place not your big guns in line of sight, whence they may be smited by the opponent on the first turn. This is really my Achilles heel. Setup for me on any scenario card is always a challenge. So you need to assess the possibilities of what may happen on that first card play. So if you are not the one getting that first turn, then you need to be aware that if you have anything in sight, somebody's going to shoot at you. And so you don't want to put, as I've got here with this example of Blankenship and the line units, yes, they are in a wonderful position to strike Rittenhouse and the heavy machine gun on the other side of that hedge. The problem is they're going second, which means Rittenhouse and the heavy machine gun are just going to lay waste to them out in the open. Keep in mind who's playing first when you are doing your setup. That is probably the most critical part. Using distance and cover and obstacles, obviously, to, especially if you are the second player, just to minimize the possibility of those valuable resources being targeted. If you have the capability of putting units farther away than the map edge, if you put units on the map edge and they get shot at, they might get broken. If they get broken on that first turn and a high roll on a route is played on you, that unit is now eliminated. So try not to put units, unless specifically articulated by the scenario card, try not to put them directly on the map edge. Move them a little bit forward, but not so far forward that you're immediately going to make contact with the enemy on their first turn.
Same thing, Achilles heel. I am the worst at it. And I have been known on occasion to just kind of throw pieces out there in frustration just to get that part of it done, and then realize how horribly bad that was as a tactic. So what I'm trying to learn to do is, if you're on defense, consider your opponent's most likely route of advance and try to cover that with multiple fire lanes, and place your leaders carefully. I used to think like leaders lead from the front, which yes, they do, but don't stick them so far out there that they in turn get endangered. Like he was talking about, don't stick your nose out where it's going to get shot on the first turn. I learned that one the hard way.
And if the scenario card gives you the opportunity to place them way out in front as a forward observer, think about that twice and 3 times, just in case. Let's move on to axiom number 7 now. Honor thy hero with many orders, so as to punish thy foe with righteous flames and holy hand grenades.
Oh, heroes, my favorite thing. Take advantage of them when you get them. These guys will do anything And the fun part of the game for me is this is where a lot of your movie moments come from. When I'm playing this and a hero hits the board, I'm seeing the movie. They're running down the road, they're hucking hand grenades, they're shooting from the hip, grabbing objectives. Whatever you need to do, your hero can try to do it. Won't say they'll survive it all, but you can dump an entire hand on these guys and just magic happens. Don't forget, as a bonus, he's a leader, so he can activate other units to join in the fun. They are still restricted to the once per turn activation for those other units, but they can lend some weight to that hero's adventures, so take advantage of that.
There's a reason I put Jefferson on here, because when I think of the heroes in Combat Commander, it is Jefferson making the run in the Dirty Dozen. Since your heroes are worth 0 victory points, which is, sad when they have an untimely demise, but they'll be back more than likely. You should be training yourself to use them for very aggressive play. Have them do the dirty work, such as melee, danger close artillery, one of my favorite things to do, since he can activate multiple times, and I've got a handful of artillery requests, have him do artillery requests. He can march in there really close and do danger close artillery strikes. If he breaks and he's lost, that's okay. And a hero equipped with a flamethrower is one of the most cinematic things you will see in Combat Commander. He can run in close, he can fire with a flamethrower. It really is very, very impressive. Use the heroes, that's what they're there for. Axiom 8. Thy opponent knows not ye fire cards. Indulge in their fear and ignorance.
When your opponent has his forces on the move, make him stop in opportune hexes so you can check your hand for possible op-fire, whether you hold a fire card or not. If you already know you've got the patented hand, oh crap, doesn't matter, make him stop. Make him sweat it. He doesn't know whether you got it or not, whether you're waiting for a better opportunity or if you're just trying to make him a little edgy as he's getting out there. You can bluff and pass on that first time and go, you know what? No, go ahead, keep moving. I'll wait. It's all good. They don't know. You could make them more cautious in their approach after that first check. You might even bluff them into stopping altogether, and you never have to tell them one way or the other.
Bluffing and subterfuge are as important in Combat Commander as any good poker game. The mere performance, acting like you're thinking about firing, can instill enough doubt in your opponent so that it will buy you some precious time, because if he's not sure that you've got a hidden wire or anything that you could play in reaction to that, that's going to cause them to pause, to doubt themselves, to doubt their plan, and you can really sell it for folks that I think don't appreciate the level of card play and card management as a psychological aspect of Combat Commander. They are really truly missing out. One of the things we try to teach folks when they're going into a melee situation and they have ambush cards is don't just plunk down and say, here's how many ambushes I have. You play them in sequence. So do you have any ambush cards? I will play an ambush card. Okay. If they have 3 possible units, they will break one. Do you have any more ambush cards? I will play another ambush card. So you can do multiples, but if you give away the farm and just say, I've got this many, that's going to change the way that that opponent plays. So part of that is the bluffing aspect. I don't know if I have more ambush cards. Maybe I do. A cunning discard play, and Kai, you mentioned this earlier on when we were talking about not doing anything and just discarding, but if you have to discard, you can pick an opportune moment to change that tempo so that if you do what is considered sort of a harmless discard, I'm just going to get rid of 3 or 4 cards, your opponent may then go, oh, this is a great time to discard, I'm going to discard 3, and then lo and behold, you're the defender and you've got a hidden unit in your hand and you've played the Puppet Master and they have gotten rid of cards and given you the chance for a reinforcement. So that's another favorite part of this game. On to Axiom 9 now. Read thy card and rules text as gospel. Infer not your heart's desires, lest ye incur the lamentations of thine error.
Don't try to make the cards say what you want them to say. What's written there is very clearly what they mean. When in doubt, consider the card text from both sides. as attacker and defender and see if you're trying to warp the intent to fit one side or the other. If you think there's some confusion on what you can get away with on that card, look at it from both sides. And would you read it the same way if you were the defender? Probably not. If you think something is missing from a rules text, read it again. These rules are well written. They have stood up to literally hundreds of thousands of games. You're probably not the first person to think you've broken something. Read it again, because chances are it's there. If you aren't seeing what you expect in a rule, yourself if you're thinking of rules from another game. I have gotten so many emails over the years of people saying, well, why can't I do this? Or where is it in the rule book that says I can or cannot do this? And I'm like, well, because we're not playing that other game. That's why it's not in this rule book, because it doesn't belong in this rule book. That's not from this game.
Exactly.
So, yeah, Chad spent a lot of time very carefully crafting his phrasing to mean exactly. That's why move and advance are two separate things. And when you have a fire come through, your instructions are not to move a counter that's in a fire hex all of a sudden. You pick it up and you place it somewhere else. You don't move it, because it's that careful of the wording that moving means something very specific. And the whole rule book was written with that care. So if you think it reads something different than what it's, read it again.
And that is an absolute reason as to why the Combat Commander rule book is held up as the gold standard of rules writing, because you should not be inferring anything. I just remember, as an anecdote about the ladder, we had a player come on and we had a furious argument over the way that the demolition action works. And it was like, no, just read it again. It's very specific of how it works. And they wanted it to go another way, but it tells you exactly how it's supposed to be. Take it as the letter of what's written there. I also want to point out that you should focus on the may versus must concept on the event or action text. For example, medic and KIA events are must do. So even if there's something out there on the board, a broken opponent unit, it's a medic, you have to rally a unit. It doesn't matter if it's yours or his. So even if it works against you, it's not to your advantage. You must do that because that is the way the event works. Same with KIA. It says eliminate a broken unit. You must do that. So that is one of the key elements of this, is to pay attention to the may versus the must. A lot of people will try to do some gamey tactics of, can I do this? Well, you can do it as long as the conditions on the action are met, versus some kind of trickery where you're just trying to get rid of a card without doing whatever it says. No, you must do what it says on the card. And that brings us then to axiom number 10. Thou shalt not concede a game of Combat Commander, especially if thy control objective number 5.
The rule in our household was never, ever give up. Just don't. Due to events and triggers, the unexpected could come to pass, and the defeat you thought was imminent is no longer looming over you. Many games have turned on a well-timed sniper, a breeze, some other vagary of war. You just don't know what's going to come up in this game. Sometimes you just need to flip one more card on the chance of triggering a game-saving occurrence. What have you got to lose? You thought the game was over for you anyway. So carry on, keep flipping those cards, and look for those opportunities.
And in this example on the screenshot here, you can see that Objective 5, which should be widely known as the most opportunistic of the objective markers, because there are lots of possibilities for it to be worth anywhere up to 10 victory points. And as you know, zero sum, that could be a 20-point swing in this game. If you know that Objective 5 is available, grab it, and it could potentially be worth a gold mine later on, as you can see in all of these examples here. Also, possession of the initiative card has won many, many tied games for players. So you must strongly evaluate surrendering that initiative card for just a reroll of any consequence in the game. Its practicality during sudden death just cannot be overstated. It is one of the most important things, because if that game is a tie and you are holding the initiative card, then you have won the game. So play it to the bitter end. Now, I will admit, I'm as guilty as the next person of like, you know what, this is mathematically impossible, I'm just going to give up. And it's usually because of time constraint, or I'm cranky, or low blood sugar, whatever. But anything can and will happen in a game of Combat Commander. That's why we play it. That's why we love it, and that's why you should always stick it out, because you just never know. We have some time for questions and discussions here. I would like to open the floor to anything that you'd like to add. We'll talk about this for a little bit, and then I'll go through some stats that I've collected for the Combat Commander ladder. But what have you got out there? We've got some ladder members here. Anybody want to chime in on stuff?
I got one, maybe. How about if Thoust has 3 ambush cards, Thoust should melee.
I can't disagree with that. If you are harvesting ambush cards as the attacker and you've got 6 slots there, and all of a sudden I got 3 or 4 fire cards with an ambush on it, then yeah, I mean, there's a high percentage probability that I'm going to be successful in there, unless I'm being baited, of course. But yeah, I would certainly go for it.
I mean, if I have 3 ambush cards, it's one of those highlights of Combat Commander that I've only seen like maybe 3 times in my life. But that's the way it is.
Yeah, and like I said before, is don't just go into the melee and plunk down all 3 of them and say, here's what I got. You play them one at a time and just see what happens, because that will critically influence the way. He's like, well, should I break that leader because that's going to lessen everybody? But then you do another one and it goes, oh, I should have done this guy instead, and that's always a lot of fun to see.
Oh, absolutely. The fun is drawing them out one by one by one and listening to the other player.
How do you have 4 ambush cards?
It's great, isn't it?
It is. What else have we got out there? Anybody?
I've got a question.
Shoot.
So, a question for both of you, but open to everybody. So, I'm a particular fan of Combat Commander Pacific, and I end up in a lot of discussions of differences between Combat Commander Europe and Pacific. And so, I'm wondering from a tactics perspective, how some of the differences, if at all, affect the tactics. If you have any ideas on this, and particularly the 2 differences I'm most interested in: the difference between recover and revive, and the difference between jam, trigger, and asset denied in Combat Commander Pacific. And those I mean, they definitely have effects. Do they affect your view on tactics in any way?
Do you want to take that first, Kai, or do you want me to take it?
No, I see what you think.
Okay. Well, and now I will say, and I think I'm like Volko out there, my first love is Pacific. I am a fan of the Pacific Theater. I think that the changes that were the evolution that went from Stalingrad into Pacific Theater were phenomenal, and I do love some of the fact that you have a little more agency on some things. I think that strengthens the card play element of it. But specifically talking about the way I play when I am the Japanese do not have a surrender level, so you can be much more aggressive with them. If you have the hero Mifune out there, he's going to charge into battle and cause all kinds of mayhem. So I do
Even just his samurai sword.
just the samurai sword, exactly.
He doesn't even need a flamethrower sometimes.
As for the revive versus the recover, I personally am a big fan of the revive point system, where you can just say, okay, let me get rid of that suppression marker on that guy, but I'll leave it on this other guy because he needs to rally from being broken. So it gives you some hard choices that you really need to consider as you're playing. And do you sacrifice that revive 5 for one broken leader right now that you may need for later? So there are elements of that I find much more appealing than the possibility of checking each one and just for a die roll he does or he doesn't, because I've been on the losing end of that die roll. It's like, oh, he rallies on 11. Oh, I rolled a 12. Okay, well, silver lining, time's advancing, I guess. There are factors to that, and I think the artillery, I think that's probably the one complaint that I've heard most from players who love Europe more than Pacific, is that, oh, you're using the Jedi power of just breaking an asset just by asset denied, rather than it being as random as it was in Europe. I don't particularly have any problems with that. I think that adds a level of cinematic enjoyment to it, where it's like, oh, here you go. Oh no, that charging handle just broke off of your heavy machine gun. Sorry. Yeah, it does certainly affect the way I play.
A lot of those effects were specifically designed because the change in the mentality of the Pacific Theater needed to be expressed in a different way than we had done with Europe, and even with Stalingrad, as fierce as that got, that the the desperation and having certain things under your control and certain things just not. So the breaking of weapons, it's not really Jedi, but it was like you've got to be able to model that the terrain and the weather and the effects of just living in those conditions was also going to have an effect on your equipment. So we needed something in addition. And you could look at it like, oh, it just happens because you wanted it to happen, but it's just one more of those random things from the other player's side. When the other person plays the card against you, that was outside of your control and your weapon is broken, because that was such a major factor in how the combat played out in there. But then, like you said, with the heroes, the revive versus recover, all of that was more to engender a sense of very desperate, very brutal combat in very close quarters. And so the only way to get all of those factors in that feel all at the same time was by changing a little bit of the core of the game. But I think that was to its benefit.
And I think the modeling of the reduction of cover by overstacking is really helpful too, because it does. You can have 12 guys stuck into a pillbox, but that's often the case of the way it was, and you've just got to a reduction, but you're not going to necessarily lose those individuals from breaking.
Right.
What other thoughts out there? Any other questions or discussions? Okay, well then I will take the opportunity here, as I said.
I'll give you one observation on one of the axioms.
Sure, do it.
While we're still there. And so you had said at the beginning, of course, that these aren't necessarily absolutes. There are situations, and so I was every time thinking about what is the situation in which I would break that axiom. And the one about move cards and having a recover or revive. So the first time I think I would go ahead and use my move cards, even if I didn't have a way to recover from a bad effect, is something we were just talking about. And that is if the adversary has like one key weapon against you, typically it's an MMG or a heavy machine gun, and that weapon is broken. And it's likely to be repaired, but right now it's down. And I've got the move cards to cover that ground, and I don't have the recover or revive. I'm going to be really tempted to take advantage of the fact that that particular weapon's not gonna hit me while I'm vulnerable.
I agree with you on that, but having said that, I have lost every game I've ever played on the ladder, so caveat there. But I definitely agree. If you've got an opportunity like that seems very clear, those are the moments you got to jump on. Those are the movie moments that you will remember that game forever if you pull it off. So, absolutely.
We just had Memorial Day and June 6th. I rewatch, as I do every year, Band of Brothers in episode 2. In Day of Days, they're assaulting Breakcore Manor, and Dick Winters pats the guy on the shoulder and says, "Wait for them to reload and then go." And that's an absolutely, if that heavy machine gun or medium machine gun's broken, whatever, the small arms fire may or may not be lucky. I will probably be one to break that rule often too. So often I have this impatience where it's like, I've got to move, and if I don't have a recover, it's always going to end up poorly. And even if I do have a recover, it's probably going to end up poorly. But that's just my little management of risk. So there are times when you'll definitely want to do that.
And look, there's fire and movement. There's suppressing fire. We've had a lot of discussions in my local group about how does the combat commander system represent suppressing fire. And my argument is it does it very well. And one way is, you've got move cards and you've got fire cards in some combination, and you're trying to cover the ground. You're the attacker, but you also have the ability to shoot at whoever it is who's going to be doing that opportunity fire. If you break the crew that's running the key heavy weapon, or you break enough units and they don't immediately recover themselves, the defenders, they're going to be recovering, but right now you've got them kind of pinned down, you've got them suppressed. You might not have everything in your hand that you need, but now's the time to go if you've got the movement card, because your suppression fire has been effective, but it's not going to last. It's this moment.
And the other time I would do that, like you say, is, I've just got an interrogation event. I know he doesn't have a fire card, so I have perfect information. Run for the hills, boys. Go for it. Well, thank you for that. Let's talk about a little bit as we wind down here with our last few minutes, the little fact sheet that I put together for our Combat Commander ladder. As always, everyone, we would love to have you there. I'm constantly, if you've watched any of the videos there at the end, we are always looking for new players. So here's a little bit of information just at a glance of what we've got going on. We have started our 8th year now. We are in round 85, so we've done quite a bit over the last 7 years. We have had a total of 255 individuals at one time or another play, and then some say, I'll play for a few months and then it's just not for me, or life gets in the way, whatever. So we've had 255 people over that span of time, but up until now, we have over 100 active players, and that's been that way for at least 3 years now, where we've hit the 100 mark, and every month we have at least 50 games going, and they span 18 different countries. When I went through and looked at the source of the players, most of them are in the continental United States, as you would expect. We have one from the Philippines, and we have a lot of Canadians, and our Canadians are the big dogs on the ladder because they're close knit and they're very, very good players. We've had 9 of them, a couple of them being our Canadians. Perfect attendance. They've played in all 85 rounds. So from the very get-go, I'm impressed that we've managed to keep that level of perfect attendance. I do use the area rating, the old Avalon Hill reliability number. So when you join the ladder, we don't know anything about your combat commander skill. So we just give you the average of 5,000. And then as you play against different opponents, we have the little formula. If you win, you get some points from them. Basically, it's everything from 0 to 200 points. So if you are a very, very strong player and you're beating up on somebody who's not very good, you're not going to get a lot of points. But if you've gone on a losing streak as I have, and you lost like 6 in a row, and then you beat someone who's a 5,500 or a 6,000, you are going to get a whole mess of area points. And that's I think, a great indicator of our relative strengths on the ladder. If you see, I'll show you here. Our highest rated player is a 6,800. He is. And he's currently on a 5 or 6 game winning streak at the top of the ladder. So once he gets up there, he tends to stay. That is Lefty, and he is one of our Canadian players, and he's fantastic. Our ladder average as a whole is 51.58. So I said 5,000 is kind of what we give you, and on the whole, most of our ladder is above average. When we take all of them together every month, that's what we're looking at, is about a 5,100. So most everyone's playing pretty skilled play. And our total posture wins to this point up to round 84 is the attackers have won 19. And that means that when we look at the win-loss for all of the postures for that particular scenario, 19 times the attacker has been the dominant player winner. The defense has won 38 rounds. And the Recon has won 17 rounds in which they played. And then we've had 10 rounds where we had an exact same number of win-losses between the two postures. So when we look at this on the surface, one of the things we do learn about Combat Commander is the defender posture tends to, on the ladder, have a higher percentage. By 2 to 1, in fact, where even though they've only got 4 cards to play with, you have a lot of goodies at your disposal. And you're also usually in a well-fortified position. Take that as you will. And I keep a running stat log of every individual round. This is what it looks like for me. And of course, I've got each individual page is the round where I keep all the stats. And as I was telling Kai before we started, she and I think, are going to get together and start crunching some of these numbers and really come into some good data products. But when you look at this all the way across, I keep track of the average skill for the month and which of the 2 postures had a particular dominance. That way we can look and see if there is a particular skew in the way the scenario was created versus what we would expect. A lot of players, or a lot of people who complain about Combat Commander say, no, it's way too random. There's no way. It's all luck based. If you get good cards and good rolls, you're always going to win. Well, as we're seeing here, and if you look on this right column here for the higher versus lower, when I take the area ratings for each month, and we can see that that's how many times in each round, or the stronger player defeats. So on the whole, when I look at all this entire column, 63% of the time through 85 rounds, the stronger player has been the overall winner in wins losses. So there is definitely a skill component to this. I think the area ratings really kind of bear that out. I'm very pleased with the amount of data that we've been able to capture over these years. But that's all I've got. I want to thank you all. If there's anything else, I will certainly be happy to stick around and talk to you afterwards. You can find me on Blue Sky, on X, on Mastodon, and Facebook. And of course, my YouTube channel is Patrick's Tactics and Tutorials, where this video will be. I'll edit and throw it up there if you want to watch it again. Kai, any final thoughts for the group before we go?
No, you can't find me anywhere. So
She was here. I saw her. She's here.
I'm not all over social media. So nope. If you happen to find me in a random corner somewhere, yeah, that's it.
Well, as a postscript all this, Kai is our one and only female player on the ladder. We've got 100 players, or 102 now, and 101 of them are guys. That's okay. That's just of interest. So we would love to see that spread out a little bit, but having you, especially with that connection back to Chad, and I want to thank you for spending the last few months on the ladder with us, and I hope for many years to come.
Oh yeah, I plan on, and I've got a little insight on that one though, because for those women who do play, they are generally married to men who also play, which means they play at home, which is why they're not on the ladder.
I get that. I totally get that. Yeah, I mean, it started out of necessity, and Vassal was the original main platform, but we've had some people say, hey, I live down the street from this player. We're going to play our match this month face to face, and I say that's great. Do it. That's what it's for. I'd certainly love to have any and everyone come and join us. Check it out and get a hold of us if you have any questions. But thank you, and I want to thank Harold for inviting us to participate again in this summer program. We hope to see you in the next one, and we will talk to you all later.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you, Kai.
Thank you so much, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.